Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented as always by Remington Tavern. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, we are off.
Yes, how you doing, Aaron?
Doing all right. Our Bearcats, they went to Houston on Saturday, and what looked promising, starting off at 10-2, was immediately followed by 3 Dan Skilling's turnovers and a 35-12 run by Houston.
And that was all she wrote, even though the Bearcats had a pretty darn good second half. Hung in there, came back after getting down. I don't know. I think they're down as many as 18.
Yeah.
You know, and they made it look better on paper. I just felt like, yes, after that 10-2 start and then the turnovers mounted and came in bunches in a hurry, that enabled Houston to claw back in, get the lead, and then get enough of a cushion that they could coast home. And to me, you know, you look at the final score and you think, okay, less than 10, they beat the spread, big whoop. They still lost a game that they probably had to have to get in the tournament field. And I'm one of those who, even if they win these next two, they beat Kansas State tomorrow night, they beat Oklahoma State Saturday, won a couple in the tournament, they're probably still outside looking in, because when the committee looks at these teams, and they're looking at teams that can make some noise in the tournament, that can take a couple of steps, that can, you know, that are teams that can actually do something in the tournament. The Bearcats' resume does not suggest that. They just flat out do not beat teams with as much talent or more talent. It just doesn't happen. And when you're looking at that, why would you expect the committee to put them in? I don't.
Yeah, I think you probably have to win the next two and then win in the tournament, what, 3 games?
Probably. And it'll depend on what other teams do around them. You know, one of those teams is probably going to fall apart and not do very well this final week. Maybe a few of them do, but they're gonna need to rely on that, which is not a good spot to be in. It's not like they've made this emphatic statement at any point this season. You know, non-conference, they were trying to, but you lose at Villanova, and I know Dixon had a special night that night. That one still burns a little bit, but when you lay it all out and you look at all the teams they played this year and the ones that have their level of talent or more, they just didn't beat them. And it's like, why would you put that team in?
You could make the same argument for Oklahoma. I mean, yeah. Oklahoma has won 3 games this calendar year in 2025. Yet here we are, where most everybody has
in trouble too. They do have some quad 1 wins, if I'm not mistaken, which is where you see really, what are they, 1-9 in that department, or is it worse than that?
Well, it's going to depend on what you do against. What is it? Is it Kansas State right now that I believe is a quad 1 if you beat them, but if they lose, then they become a quad 2, I think. So it's just, I don't know.
You're talking about them beating a team that's kind of in that same kettle that they're in. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's just it's very disappointing. It's been a disappointing year, and I just and Saturday they got their brains kicked in the paint in the first half. I mean, it was just abysmal. The scoring, and they, you know, they probably were outscored by 16 or so in the paint for the game. There's just nothing they can do inside against anyone that has a presence inside. They have no capability of scoring down low. they'll run that pick and roll with a lob to Aziz, and that's good for 1 or 2 a game, but that's kind of it. And it just it's very disappointing. And they've got to, I know this is no news flash to the coaches, but that's got to be repaired. You cannot. Very few teams, let's put it this way, very few teams can be very successful just relying on outside scoring and outside shooting. It's not always there. And
Right.
UC found that out the hard way in January. It is not always there. So you have to have some other ways to score where you're a little closer to the basket. You have some bunnies, you have some lay-ins, you have some little baby hooks, whatever. There's got to be some kind of scoring presence inside. And there has been zero for this team. That's why they're where they're at.
Yeah, something you definitely have to look at for roster construction next season, without getting too far into the weeds, is you've got to have somebody who weighs more than 260,
Right.
Whether that be at the 4 spot or the 5 spot or both. You certainly have to have at least one dude down there who can back somebody up when you need a basket. And to your point, so yeah, I'm with you there, because truthfully, Houston ate down low. I mean, you had
oh my God. And that team's very good. Look, a lot of people who know a lot of basketball say this could be Houston's year. This might be the team. And between Tugler
and Roberts and even Francis off the bench, who was their starter last year, who doesn't start and plays minimal minutes at this point, they all got to eat against Cincinnati, both points and rebounds. So they had their way.
And then you got a guy like Cryer that could do the things he does, and it's just that puts a lot of heat on the opponent. But that's one of the best teams in the country. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on what happened Saturday, but there was just so much more probably on the line for UC than Houston, because they were going to wrap up that regular season title one way or the other. But there was just a lot more on the line. UC needed that signature win. Maybe they'll get a chance again in the tournament and can turn the table. And they can still get in. I think I saw today, like one of them, ESPN, maybe had them at a 34% chance or somewhere in that neighborhood. So yeah, there's a decent chance, not a great one. But I'm not holding my breath because I've been watching this for 2 months.
I joked on the aftermath that I was rooting for Dan Skillings to get a flagrant 2 versus the flagrant 1.
Yeah, you and everybody else.
But can you recall, at least in Bearcats basketball, a bigger fall off from one season to the next than what Dan Skillings has been, to go from honorable mention, Big 12, all Big 12 last season, to do you even belong playing for a Power 4 conversation this season?
It's jarring what has happened with him. And, if you asked me the reverse, if I've thought of a guy who exploded after, maybe having a so-so year as a freshman or so, there's a lot of those examples. There's not a lot of guys going the other way like this. I mean, he has fallen off the map, and quite honestly, it's been unplayable.
Is it shades of like maybe? Is it shades of maybe like a Keith Williams?
Yeah, but he didn't fall off like this.
I guess it was just a different scheme by the time he was
It was, and there were other people to score around him and stuff. Yeah, Vic had it bad last year. I don't know. But I still maintain, if Vic had been playing, Grambling or someone, he still would have gotten his numbers last year after they got in the Big 12 play, when he just totally disappeared. And he's had his moments with Clemson, but this Dan thing is unbelievable. I mean, you're looking at a guy who could score inside, could score some outside, was not a walking turnover machine. He was never the best handle with the ball, but he wasn't nearly as poor as what we've seen this year. Seems like every facet of his game has fallen off the cliff.
I used to joke last season that we had to wait for the first possession that Dan would turn it over immediately. The first time he would touch the ball, almost every game, he would turn the ball over at the very beginning of the game, and then we'd be fine once we got that out of the system.
Yeah.
This year, though, it doesn't stop.
And those 3 straight the other day in the first half were just come on. And then somebody right after, I think it was Betsy, made a lazy pass. It got picked and taken in for and it's just like, you guys had a 10-2 lead, and then you start throwing it around like that.
And you can't do that with that team.
That's very discouraging.
You certainly can't do that with Houston. Houston will take advantage of that every single time and twice on Sundays.
Funny story about Vic. A couple of weeks ago, I'm watching the game with someone, and he had like 20 at halftime or something, but we had a meeting during the first half, so we weren't really watching the game. Then we saw he had 20. We stick around the second half to watch him play, and it's like, it finally gets a point. We're 10 minutes into the second half. He has not scored another bucket. And it's like, we will wait until he scores before we leave this place. I don't think he ever did. I think he had a great first. I'm not sure if he ever scored again in that game. I forget who it was. Clemson won. They were playing.
Was it Duke?
Was it that game? It was a Monday night.
I don't know.
I can't remember. It was like 2 weeks ago on a Monday night or 3 weeks ago. But it was funny. It's like, I'm still and I liked Vic. I liked him when he was here, and I thought he carried himself well. Funny guy. I saw him at the Hall of Fame dinner, and the speech he gave there when he got some award a couple years ago was great. Funny guy, engaging. So, I was hoping for the best for him, but he kind of haunted me once again, making me hang out and wait in that second half, and I don't think he ever did score again. I finally gave up with 3 or 4 minutes to go.
I don't know. It's just it's frustrating when you get the type of play that you got out of Day and even Jizzle on a down night shooting. Going 8 of 19, he still manages to find 18, which truthfully looking back, it doesn't even feel like he had 18, which it's I don't know, kind of crazy to think that he had that. But you get that kind of play out of those two guys getting 37 points. We begged for that kind of just shooting, that kind of aggression earlier in the season. And now, when you get nothing worth note from your bench, you got 12 points between Seamoss with his 9 and Dan with his 3. How the mighty have fallen there. And to get 4, 5, and 6 from Josh Reed, Dylan Mitchell, and Aziz, it's tough. It's tough. And again, I think it goes back to just the presence of Juwan Roberts and Javier Francis and Tugler down there, because they're just big dudes. They play a really, really awesome brand of defense that looks really familiar, oddly enough.
Yeah. Somebody was taking notes when he was getting his brains beat in by Cincinnati every game, and he took good notes. I mean, he's got that kind of defense going on down in Houston now, and we'll see how far it takes them this year. But they've got a shot. They're in that handful plus of teams that can win it all.
I don't know. We all had super high expectations for this team, and I think that's probably the most frustrating thing looking back over the course of the last 5 months or so since this thing started in November. It's maddening. Even going through out of conference the way that we did to finish 10-1, right where you needed to be, and then just to fall off a cliff in January. 1 month did you in.
I mean, this team they played tomorrow night, they that's a game they could have had out there. And that I'm not remembering correctly, but that was right near the beginning of this thing, right? When they played at Kansas State and got that loss there.
First game of conference play.
Yeah. And it's like, oh God, that's one given, and their conference schedule was a little front loaded with good teams. So that was an important game that they let get away, and that kind of set a tone that took them a while to get out of.
And Cincinnati is 9.5-point favorites at home against Kansas State tomorrow.
That means I can make money on my money line bet then.
It
Because I
looks
will.
like
I did. You'd laugh. Like the Houston bet, it was like you bet $5 to make, I can't remember what it was, a dime or 50 cents or something stupid. It was so, I'm like, why am I even doing this? But I didn't lose, unfortunately. Um, but I'll do it again tomorrow night. Just to I'll close it out.
ESPN's analytics gives Cincinnati a 78.1% chance to beat Kansas State as well. I don't know. What do you want to see to give you any type of hope going into both the on senior night?
Well,
going
yeah,
into your last game.
I guess they're going to honor 4, aren't they? Frederick and CJ Anthony, who may be back, or what's he going to do? I know Wes talked about him today at the news.
Wes says that he wants to basically he's thought about putting him in. Did not ever put him in only because they wanted to make sure that he has the opportunity next season to go play and make NIL money for somebody else.
Right. Okay.
It was a mutual respect thing because he thinks that he can go play for a team that's not in the Big Ten or I'm sorry, the Big 12 and do some damage.
Certainly hope he does. I hope he gets that chance. But the 2 CJs, CMOS and Aziz, are the ones that'll be honored tomorrow night. And then I want to see, what do I want to see? My God, how about consistent play from start to finish? But I don't know that you're going to get that with the way they're built. I just don't know. But you would certainly like to see them have a good, rousing performance in their last game before heading to Oklahoma State and then playing in that tournament. They got to get something going. And look, they have played better lately, and they've won some games. And they weren't expected to win Saturday at Houston. So you just got to hold serve, look pretty damn good, and get the win. And that's all they can do now. Move on to the next one and hope they win on the road at Oak State.
We also hear that there's a chance that both Day could be back. That's why he's apparently not walking. There's an opportunity where he may be back next season, along with Connor Hickman as well. So those, I think, are 2 guys you probably want to see back in the fold.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I think Day's played pretty well. I've always liked him. He seemed like it seems like now he's been a little more consistent game to game than what he was. Yeah, he seems like he's really starting to be comfortable and hitting his stride and all that stuff. I'm kind of anxious. Because they are a little strapped with CJ hurt, and I'm sure we'll see Dan get some minutes tomorrow night, but I'm going to be surprised or interested to see how much he does get, because quite honestly, if he goes out there and there's a turnover or 2, he's got to be done, right? You just can't keep doing it.
I said last night on the BBP that I would be totally okay if the starters, all 5 of them, played about 38 minutes each.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And, Aziz has been gutting out more and more minutes. And I really wish Arrington Page would have taken off more this year. I really, the first time I saw him on the floor and the way up, I thought there was a lot of promise there, a lot of hope. And for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reason is, but it just hasn't translated to any kind of improvement or really more minutes on the court. They're having to play Aziz a lot. They're playing with the smaller lineup a lot. And sometimes that smaller lineup works, but I don't know that you can do a steady diet of that stuff when you're playing in the Big 12.
Doesn't work really well against Houston, as we found out.
Yeah, not at all. There's no stopping.
No. So in any case, tomorrow night, again, senior night, tip-off's at 7, and the game's going to be on ESPN Plus. But Cincinnati hosts Kansas State, win that one. And truthfully, I do believe if you can pull off 5 more, finish off the schedule, winning 2, and then win 3 more in the tournament, then I think that we're having a completely different conversation. I think this team is capable of it. I just don't believe that they can do it. if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then you start looking at these teams around them on the bubble, and you're right. If they do that, they may get their way in if they do that. Because it's every year you talk about these bubble teams and how close they are and how soft the bubble is, this, that, all that. It seems like it happens every year. But you got to prove you can beat somebody that's, a top 25 team, even if they're ranked 25th. And I just feel like this team just kind of just lets it slip one way or the other every time they face a team with as much talent. And that's a problem. That's a big problem.
Well, in fairness, they did beat BYU one out of the 2 games they played BYU, and BYU is currently ranked 23. So,
yeah, it looked a lot better here than it did out there, if I remember right.
That's true story.
Yeah.
Out there,
that's second. I mean, look, road games are tough. Conference road games are tough. We all know that. I don't know what happened in that game out there.
Ooh.
Oh boy, that was a bucket of cold water to the face for sure. That's when it's like, oh my God, it is this bad.
That second half, I think they shot like 75% or something absurd.
God, those guys couldn't miss. That one was lighting it up.
Yeah,
from 3, it was just ridiculous. But you're going to have nights like that, but there's been too many of them.
Like I said, tomorrow night, 7:00. The first of a 5-game series, in my opinion. If you can do it.
Because you're right. I think 4, and they just don't have enough. And will the 1 win make that much difference? Yeah, if it's against a quad 1 team, it could make a big difference, because when you look at the quad 1 and quad 2 together, then you see his resume starts looking a little better when you're comparing against these other teams. But when they break it down, and they're going to be splitting hairs, because they are every year on these bubble teams, and those teams that fared better in quad 1 games are going to get the break. I'm just telling
you. Moving topics right along. 3 Bearcats go to the NFL Combine. Corey Kiner, Luke Kandra, John Williams. Luke Kandra and John Williams put up excellent bench numbers, finishing, I believe, 1st and 3rd.
Yeah, how about that?
It's absurd. You'd love to see that out of guys who have high aspirations. John Williams coming on out of nowhere this past season and having an outstanding season. Probably the least talked about Bearcat who had an outstanding season.
Without question. No doubt. I mean, and then he goes up to the Combine and does what he does. And just perusing some of the national outlets and their winners and losers of the Combine and all that. And he got some play in those. I mean, he definitely turned some heads up there, and that's good. And I think all 3 of them have a good shot. All 3 of them. I think Luke does. I think, Kiner doesn't have that top end speed, but
got tiny hands. He had the second smallest hands in the history of the Combine.
I think it was him. I saw the response. Just throw it to me and I'll catch it. I do every time. It was pretty funny. He had a good interview session up there. And then, I've read some stuff about him too, where like some of these metrics the NFL uses to judge these running backs. And it's tough. Like I was like David Montgomery from Cincinnati went to Mount Healthy. His measurables at the Combine and some of his numbers in these drills and stuff weren't good, but what he did and put on tape in college, and then when you use some of those metrics like yards after contact, things of that nature, and Corey's kind of the same way. David may have a little more top end speed. I don't know. I don't know if I can say that with conviction. I just feel like he maybe has a little more burst, but I don't know. Corey kind of does, and he's hard to get on the ground. And NFL teams love that. It's like a guy that doesn't go down with the first ankle tackle or, contact. They like that, because how many situations are you in the NFL where it's 3rd and 2, 4th and 1? Every freaking series you're facing one of those. So you want someone that can get that first down. That's very, very valuable. So I'm anxious to see. I mean, does he get drafted? I don't know if he gets drafted, and if he does, where. I mean, for God's sakes, Ivan Pace didn't get drafted. Now we know why, but then he steps in and it's an immediate starter. And it's like all these NFL types are like, I guess we should have looked at the tape more and not, how tall he is.
If they end up getting rid of the tush push, I think a guy who can get you that extra yard or two becomes even more valuable because you now don't have the
get away. Should they do away with that? I'm not sure. Like, how do you legislate that? It's going to be tough.
I don't think you should personally, because I think that if you can do it, how's it going against the what is the spirit of football? You're playing the game. You're not doing anything outlandish. You're just pushing the guy who has the ball. Which, how often do they do that anyway?
Down by the goal line where a guy's going in, and here comes a big tackle pushing him in. It happens all the time. It's hard. So is that going to be illegal too? That's what they. I will say this: the NFL is not afraid to tinker with rules, though. They'll do, as we saw with the kickoff rule, they'll do anything and everything if they think they need to do it. Remember when they used to challenge pass interference, and what a disaster
that didn't last very long.
No, that was a disaster. But good for them to recognize that and say, "Oh my God, this is terrible. We got to get rid of this." It didn't linger. So, I'm not sure which way they'll go on that, but you're absolutely right. If they get rid of that, it's, and a team like the Bengals doesn't do that. I wonder, though, if they have thought on a 4th and 1. And now you're playing with fire, though, but if you had, I don't know, someone with good hands take the snap and push him, because I don't want Joe Burrow being in the middle of that crap.
Sure. I get that. But that doesn't mean you don't necessarily bring in, maybe that's what you do with your backup quarterback. If you don't want to put the franchise guy in harm's way like that, but maybe you do that with your backup. I don't know. Just different things.
You get some guy, maybe they can put Cordell Volson back there to take the snap and shove him through the middle of them.
Or maybe Cordell Volson gets cut before, opening day kickoff.
Alex Kappa did.
Well, and let's get to that. Next topic I wanted to cover is actually the Bengals. So the Bengals did make some moves this week. We saw Alex Kappa, who had dreadful numbers this season, truthfully. He was, I believe, number 1 in sacks given up. He was number 1 in pressures given up. People were joking about him being a triple crown. I can't remember what the third thing was. Maybe pressure percentage or something. But he was not good. He was good. He was a good signing at the time, and he served his time as best as he could. And again, the first 2 seasons were far better than that third season, and it was what it was. But they also cut. Completely blanked.
Well, Mike Hilton's putting out 5 ideas. Sheldon Rankins is gone. I wasn't surprised by that. I guess he's getting some interest. Is going to have interest. I guess next Monday they can start negotiating with these free agents, and that's when all this stuff starts leaking out. These agents put that out there, and get their guys some pub, and hopefully we'll hear something about the Bengals, in the mix for some guys, because they definitely, they got to go find some people.
Well, and J.J. Watt's off the table now because the goalkeeper ended up giving up some goals there today.
He doesn't have to Skyline now. He can just stick with Subway, I guess.
He did say he didn't like Skyline anyway. So
that was funny. He was probably just clowning. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. I mean, that is an acquired taste, I guess. But
sure,
when you grow up with it, you don't think about that. But they won't have him to play at defensive end. But they've got some. This is going to be a crazy offseason for them. I mean, I swear to God, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't.
And what do you do with Sam Hubbard?
They're going to go out and find a guard to replace Kappa, or who knows what they're going to do on the defensive line. I don't know. They need help there. Pratt's wanting to trade. What are they going to do with linebackers? And then, you got the defensive backs. It's like, what? This is crazy. But maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be cathartic.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hubbard's name's been mentioned as a guy that they're either looking to trade or maybe also going to end up a cut casualty just to free up some more space. And you did put the franchise tag on T. Higgins. So he's set to make 26.2. You've had former Bengals receivers, both Chad Johnson and TJ Houshmandzadeh, making public comments about it in different talk shows and what have you. Chad says it's disrespectful. He said that you need to sign the guy. You don't need to franchise tag him. The tag is disrespectful. I'll disagree. I get him taking the player's side, but it's within the rules. It is part of the player negotiations that happen with the NFLPA and the NFL. While I may not like the 2-season tag thing, I understand them doing it and allowing themselves the time to try and lock up a deal without having to worry about negotiating against others. So you do allow yourself that freedom. TJ says that he thinks that they're going to get a deal done, but now he thinks they have the space to do it. You don't want to piss off Joe Burrow because if you continue to let guys like Jesse Bates walk and if you have T. Higgins walk, then you're setting yourself up for Joe to potentially walk when this deal's up. So right. if you bring in T, though, TJ was making the argument that you set the floor at 26.2 with the franchise tag, as opposed to what you could have had him for 2 seasons ago had you started the negotiations back then at $20 million, which is where the receivers market was at for a guy of that stature just 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, and I totally expected him to do this to buy more time. The trouble is if they don't get anything done, and is he going to play on that tag if it comes to that? And we'll, I'm sure he's going to let his thoughts known if he gets, past July 15th and there's no deal. I would say there's a chance they're going to have a problem there, a good chance. And they just got to find a way to sign Chase too and get his name in the contract. So good luck, Duke Tobin. I know you're up for the job, but God dang, it's going to be tough to fit everyone in there and do. I don't know what their plan is, because you cannot rely on going into the draft and hitting on like 5 guys in the draft that'll be helping you on the field this year. If you get a couple, hallelujah.
And if you're looking to trade him, if you're not able to go get a long-term deal put together, you already have New England looking to make a move for A.J. Brown potentially. That's something that's been out there today. Deebo Samuel just got moved for was it a 5th round pick?
Yeah.
Which is bananas to me.
I could not believe that when I saw that. I thought because I'm looking at the bottom line. It was just on the bottom line. I forget where I was. And I'm thinking, is this the same guy? Am I thinking of the right guy? So, that seems like I would think the market would be better than that for him. But, they at least have their options.
But bear in mind, he did miss 5 games last season due to injury. Whether that was all true injury or not remains to be determined. But that's what we've been told. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see what they do, and obviously, depending on what you do between now and the actual draft itself, or even in the draft, any move that you make potentially either fills a hole or opens a hole up, because we're not talking about guys in the middle or the bottom of the depth chart.
No, exactly. And, I am just amazed at how much the Bengals have on their plate for being a team that as good as they are and coming through this season. And look, it was disappointing. We all know what went wrong, but they weren't that far. You looked at them every week, even at the end of the season, you thought this is a team that could make some noise in the playoffs. They're that good. So how are they going to put all this back together when, is Mike Hilton definitely gone? Obviously they're looking for an offensive guard, if not 2 of them that are starting caliber, right? You're looking for a defensive end. I don't know. I mean, Hubbard did try to play through an injury. Was that the bulk of it? Or, Is that what you're going to get from him when he's healthy? I don't know. I think, and they'll learn more about that as they go along. But there's just there's a lot of holes, man, to fill, and there's a lot of players out there. And I read that they're not giving up, and they shouldn't give up on Miles Murphy yet. But you can't just plug him in.
What do you do with Trey Hendrickson? Because is he going to play? Is he going to sit out? Do you have to trade him? Are you going to be able to re-sign him? If you re-sign him, does that put you in a spot where you can't go long-term with T?
Yeah, and then you're really starting behind the eight ball with that defense. I mean, wasn't defense kind of the problem anyway? And then
it was the whole problem.
Player on that defense and let
the
him
whole
walk
problem
while you sign these two high-priced wide receivers. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can play the game where you just got to go outscore everyone. And with the offense they have and the weapons they have, they could probably do pretty good playing that game. But still, you got to stop somebody when push comes to shove. And you're not going to do it when you let people like Trey Hendrickson walk.
You also have Al Golden here. And what kind of fight is he going to give up for a guy like Trey Hendrickson to make sure that he's got a guy whose name was in Defensive Player of the Year discussions last season? He's not going to want to start his career off. I can't imagine letting a guy like that walk.
He would probably be feeling lose pain if that in fact happens.
I'm curious to see what he ends up doing with a guy like Pratt, because maybe that's not the guy he wants there at the middle linebacker position. So there's a lot of different things. Mike Hilton, again, is he an Al Golden guy? Who knows? Just you wonder how much that's going to play into it. And again, with Al Golden coming in, what was promised to him about the draft? Because you have to imagine that was a conversation as you're going through the interview process. Right. Am I going to get what kind of draft capital am I getting as the defensive coordinator here? Because the defense is shitty.
Right. Yeah. And, getting back to the Pratt thing too, I don't know if he and Al, how they got along when he was here before. And I should have gone back and looked at the timeline when Pratt requested his trade, but was that before Al came back or after? Because if it's after, then there's probably no repairing that deal.
I thought it came right after our DC was gone, because people said that he may want to.
I think you're right. Hopefully, he and Al had a decent relationship, and that's not going to be a hindrance. But then again, I mean, they might be able to do better too. I don't know. It just depends on what Al likes, and that's a good coach they have. They've got a good defensive coordinator. I think they had one before, but this guy's been around. He's been successful. Obviously puts out schemes that work and knows what kind of players he wants for those schemes. So, they're going to put a lot of trust in that guy to rebuild that defense. And hopefully they give him enough of the players to do what it is he wants to do, because I have a lot of respect for him as a coach and what he's done over his career.
So we will certainly see what kind of wiggle room Al Golden has as he steps into his new role, taking over from Lou Anarumo. Everything we should have plenty of answers here over the course of the next month or so.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. Like, next week's going to be huge because all those big free agents, they get snapped up pretty quickly. And I don't know how much the Bengals are going to be able to swim in that end of the pool, but they're going to have
They don't ever play in that end of the pool, though. They wait until that first wave is over, done, gone, and then they get the scraps.
They did, but then, they went out and got Hendrickson like on day one of negotiating a few years back. Kappa was one. Karras was one. They did kind of change there for a couple years where they got in on the front end, but I don't know with the way all these balls in the air financially for them, I don't know what they're going to be able to do.
You're spinning a lot of plates right now. So
it really is. I mean,
we'll see.
Last off season was going to be a little interesting, with the whole T thing then. And even the couple before that, there were like obvious holes that they could fill in free agency. And they did pretty well in free agency. But boy, this one has way more balls in the air than what I remember. It's crazy. but they knew this was coming. I mean, don't you kind of have to plan for this stuff and stagger it? And when your guys are on rookie contracts, get them a year or two early before you even get to this point.
Well, that's how Philadelphia ended up winning a Super Bowl, but I digress. But speaking about balls in the air, George,
yes.
spring training is happening. Actually, currently there's a game going on as the Reds are taking on the Dodgers. Chase Petty took the mound tonight, but there's been a lot going on down there. You've seen Ellie De La Cruz doing all of the things, literally all of the things. He's hitting really well. He's walking. He's doing everything
tonight in the first inning, and then stole second, I believe.
He's doing everything that you would want to see him do in spring training. I'm almost hopeful that they shelf him and just let him.
I know. I was just thinking
that. But you've also seen Matt McLean hitting really well and doing his thing. You've seen Tyler Stevenson doing well. Will Benson is hitting really well. He had 2 homers last night, I believe. He is. Well, that could be the outfielder that you didn't sign if he could actually play up to that first round draft talent that he was once upon a time.
He's still got a load of talent. There's no doubt about it. He's just got to quit striking out.
Sure.
That's the big problem there.
That was the report card.
Came back, and you see how much that injury really hurt them last year.
That was the report card on the entire team last season, though. You also see a guy like our Bulldog reliever last night get hit around they hit around the order.
Well, it's spring training. They're working on like different stuff. That's what they used to always tell me. But these pitchers it's hard to really judge what the hell goes on early in spring training with pitchers, because sometimes they are like fiddling around with a new pitch, or doing this, doing that, trying to do, they want to get all their experimentation out of the way as soon as they can.
I would be okay with
that. Green's experimenting, by the way.
I'm talking about Graham Ashcraft, though. I wouldn't be so concerned if he hadn't lost his spot last season and been sent to AAA, and now he's getting hit around the entire order in an inning.
Oh yeah, he got beat around good.
That's crazy, and you got to think that he's not necessarily there tinkering, but trying to win a spot on this 26-man roster at this point. I would think.
Now his first couple of outings, okay. But yeah, that thing was a disaster. Was that today or last night or today?
That was yesterday. I think that was yesterday.
But it was a disaster for him, for a guy, hoping to land a spot. And, with Abbott out, there's certainly a spot open that he could take. Abbott thinks he's going to be back by opening day. Hopefully he's right. But yeah, Graham Ashcraft is a wild card. I don't know. I know this. If he does that very many times, Francona isn't going to rely on him.
Nor should.
But you do have Abbott and Louder both with injuries right now. And it really sounds like Louder's the one that won't be ready by the start of the season. But Abbott, I hope Abbott's right, and he will be. And I don't understand these lingering injuries with Abbott and Spencer Steer. Like, wouldn't you?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
But it's how does this happen? Like, you would think if you have a lingering injury and it's bothering you in December, you're not able to do. I don't know. I don't get it.
I present to you last season Matt McLean in the exact same scenario. It was the exact same scenario. So I don't understand how they find themselves back in this situation when you have an incompetent medical staff.
I'm wondering, like, it seems to me like once January 1st hits, every player needs to come in and have a physical. And so you know where they are. And if something's bothering them, please start the process then. I don't know why. If you've got this much invested in these players, like, my God, I'm not waiting till camp rolls around to give them a physical.
Well, there should be a plan in place during, I don't know, during exit interviews. There should be a plan. There should be a plan in place at the end of last season where you need to be, what parameters you need to get past by X time, like what the expectations are. I don't know. It blows my mind that they have this much incompetence in their medical staff for a professional. We're not talking AAA. I can understand if maybe AAA wasn't at the same level, or AA, or even single A, but we're talking about one of 30 teams that just simply can't figure out how to get their players healthy in the offseason, George, or during the season for that matter.
I get it if you show up and everything's fine and then something, is bothering you.
Yes.
But that's not what this was. I mean, it's like they showed up with this stuff, and then Steer gets a cortisone shot a couple days ago, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I hope neither one of them are any, everyone hopes neither one of them are anything serious, but I just don't understand why this is happening.
It's 2 years in a row with young talent that you cannot afford to waste while they are here on these very team-friendly contracts.
Yes, very team-friendly. And you have to take advantage of that. And I don't know. I hope all three of them are ready to go, but that's and hopefully Ashcraft finds whatever it is he had his first couple of years with the Reds, because last year was all over the map, and the last outing was terrible. But it seems like Hunter Green's kind of trying to find his way, but he's probably somebody that might be screwing around with stuff. If I were him, I wouldn't screw around with anything the way he finished the year last year. Although he had to get shut down for a little bit, but when he came back and threw that last game, he pitched damn well.
Well, they were also running him out there, and he's puking every time he's on the mound. So I don't know what was going on with him last season.
I don't know. What could that possibly be, you think? Like,
who knows?
I mean, I don't think he's out getting hammered the night before, and I don't think that's going on. I don't know.
Weird stuff.
That was baseball is so weird anyway. It's just so weird things.
Another guy who's doing pretty well, though. I know we mentioned Will Benson. Another young name that's standing out. Christian Encarnacion Strand is mounting a little bit of a comeback season.
And I hope we find out, yes, it was the wrist, and that issue was what was holding him back early last year. Because when he got to the Reds and they played, he was full of promise, and his career has kind of been that way. So hopefully it was the wrist, and he gets on track and becomes kind of the thumper they need over there at first base. And we'll see if our buddy they signed in the outfield continues to play well. Yeah, we'll hopefully, because no matter what, with Will Benson and Fraley, and the mix is a lot better with that guy in there, I think. It just gives Francona more options, and who couldn't love what he said the other day on that television broadcast?
Just trying to get out there and kick some ass.
That's what you got to do. It's so funny that he puts it that way, but he's right. This is professional. This is the major leagues. Your job is to win any way you can. And if that means, getting a guy in from third with one out and you make it out in the process, that's what you do. Don't stand there begging for a walk with a man 90 feet away and one out.
Well, you bring up Francona, and you had some base running errors here over the course of the last two games. One by Candelario last night, and one the night before by TJ Friedel. I believe I have those in the right order. But is that anything that you have any type of concern with in spring training?
Well, yeah, because you want to develop good habits and good instincts on when to go, when not to go. Now, in and of itself, those two, no, I'm not waving a red flag and all that. But I bet you Francona is. I bet you he's talked about it.
I was gonna say, I'd imagine there's conversation. He's not gonna yank anybody from a spring training game or anything like that. But if we're in the regular season, I would expect probably a shorter leash with Terry Francona.
Yeah, I would too. But you know, to me, now is the time to develop the better habits when it comes to that, because that killed them last year. They ran themselves out of so many innings and rallies. It was maddening. It was hard to watch. I mean, I can't imagine how many people threw stuff watching Reds games last year because of running errors, running mistakes, and I'm sure Terry's all over that. I would love to know what his take is on that, what his philosophy is, and hopefully I'll find out. I was going to go down there next week, but I can't do it now. I wanted to go down for a few days.
Well, maybe
know
we
what he thinks of that.
Maybe we'll see if we can't get somebody on who has been down there over the course of the next week or two.
Yeah, you know what? I'll talk to you about that, because I can probably rattle a cage or two and get someone on to talk about what's going on there, and maybe I can get my good man Mark Sheldon on.
Well, we will see how that goes. In any case, last topic here, FCC, they're playing in the CONCACAF tournament. What are your thoughts on this before season turn? I prefer before season than in the middle of the season. I'll say that.
Well, it is kind of, it's at the beginning, but they played Saturday night in MLS play and lost 4-1 at Philly, who I guess Philly must have their act together, because they're looking, I think they've won their first two. It's so early, but Cincinnati called it a wake-up call, and it probably will be good for them. I'm not really worried about it yet, but it looks like Philly and Columbus are doing their usual thing. And it was just, Coach Noonan wasn't completely upset, but he, let it be known that there were I don't know. It was an interesting post game with him about what he thought about how the players performed, and just little things that they couldn't do that they usually do. And but there's no real concern there. And this tournament thing, it to me, it's kind of crazy. It's like, if you have a league, that should be the most important thing, and that's what it just it's weird. But soccer does that. Like, it's the people who are complete soccer heads, they think we're crazy because that's all they know is like they play in all these things all at the same time. But to me, it's a little odd, and I'd rather have a clean MLS season. Or I don't really like those breaks either. They have those international breaks where guys can go play in these tournaments with their international teams. It's strange to me, but I'm just used to MLB, NHL, NFL, NBA, college football, college basketball, and whatever happens in high schools. And the soccer games are fun. They're fun to go to. I just don't understand that structure of it, but I guess that's what works best for MLS, so they can get some of these higher tier players to play in MLS, and also, they get the opportunity to do this other stuff.
Well, they finished with a tie in the first leg tonight, though. 1-1.
Yeah, it's a 2-game aggregate, so they'll play that team
draw.
Yes,
draw, not a tie. I'm not allowed to say the wrong things there. But they'll play again on.
Keeper allowed 1 goal. So they'll play this same team again next Tuesday in Mexico, and then whatever the aggregate score is, that team moves on, and they're in the round of 16 now.
They also play on Saturday at Toronto, and they look to be the favorites to win that game, minus 145. So, anything you got on local hoops, George?
Well, they're heading into the regionals now in Ohio, which the regional semifinals would be like a Sweet 16. You're down to 16 teams in each division. And the surprise in Ohio Division I, since we last talked, Sycamore knocked off Moeller, who was a 4 seed. Sycamore's a 12 seed. Sycamore beat Moeller, then beat number 2 Wayne, and is in the is in one of the regional semifinals, which kudos to Tim Osting and the coaching staff there, because that's a hell of a job to knock those two teams off back to back and get to those regional semifinals. St. X, the number 1 seed, still alive. Winton Woods is the number 1 seed in Division II. They're still alive. And in Kentucky, we finally made it to the regional tournaments, which is different than Ohio. The regional tournaments that'll begin on Saturday here with the 9th region. Whoever wins that region, then you're down to the Sweet 16. So it's completely different than Ohio, because when Ohio has regions, the winner of the regions, then you're down to the state Final Four. So it can be confusing, but I've done it in both states for 40-some years. So plus I grew up around it. So to me, it's kind of normal. The weird thing is in Kentucky, and Chad's Lloyd team is in the 9th region tournament. They won their district, beat Dixie Heights in the district championship. So there he is, a proud alum. How about that?
Go Jugs.
You have a reason to go to Truist Arena on Saturday now.
It's probably not going to happen.
I know. I get how that goes. But yeah, so all kinds of good stuff. We have Northern Kentucky, have teams in Northern Kentucky playing in Region 8, 9, and 10. So it's still all over the map. Still a long ways to go before they're crowning a champion.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us here on George in the Jungle. As always, thank you, George. But we also want to thank Remington Tavern for sponsoring this little show. You can find them at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. But for George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith. We will be back here next Tuesday at 9 o'clock p.m. to cover all of your Cincinnati sports.
Thank you, Aaron.